Israel is the reason for this war. America does not want to fight this war for Israel.
Let's go. Come on, let's go.
Stand up as a Marine. Stand up for America. No one.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
The microphone trembled in his hand. A former U.S. Marine stood before a crowd of journalists and activists, his face burning with anger after years of silence. He had fought in the Middle East. He had seen the explosions, the chaos, the bodies of fellow soldiers. But what haunted him most wasn't the battlefield. It was the questions. Why are American soldiers dying here? He asked. The room went quiet. Then the veteran said something that shocked everyone listening. We were told we were defending freedom, but that's not the whole truth. He claimed many soldiers on the front lines were beginning to realize something disturbing. The wars they were fighting were far more complicated than they had been told. According to him, many troops felt they were being pushed into endless conflicts driven by powerful political interests far away from the battlefield. American soldiers are risking their lives, he said, his voice rising. But the real decisions are made by people who never step onto the battlefield. His words spread quickly across social media. For some people, he was a hero who dared to speak the truth. For others, his claims were controversial and dangerous. But one thing was certain: the silence among veterans was beginning to break. And when soldiers start telling their stories, the world starts paying attention. For many American soldiers, the war in the Middle East was supposed to be clear. They were told they were fighting terrorism. They were told they were protecting their country. But once they arrived on the battlefield, reality looked very different. Long patrols through burning deserts, explosions that came without warning, friends who never made it back home. Day after day, the war dragged on with no clear end. Some soldiers began to quietly ask questions among themselves. If we're winning, why does this war never stop? Behind closed doors and military bases, many troops started sharing the same doubts. They wondered who truly benefited from years of endless conflict. Was it about security, politics, power, or something far more complicated, hidden behind global alliances and geopolitical interests? For some veterans, the realization came slowly. The battlefield was not just a place of combat. It was a place where belief, loyalty, and truth were constantly being tested. And the deeper they looked, the more questions began to appear. Questions that would follow them long after the war was over. Before many American soldiers deployed to the Middle East, they had already formed an image in their minds. They were told the region was full of enemies, dangerous, hostile, unforgiving. But once they arrived on the ground, some soldiers experienced something they never expected. Ordinary people, families trying to live their lives, children playing in dusty streets, shopkeepers opening their stores every morning despite the constant sound of helicopters and distant explosions. Some troops recalled moments that deeply changed their perspective. An elderly man offering them tea, a mother thanking them for helping her child, villagers who simply wanted the violence to end. For certain soldiers, these encounters shattered years of fear and stereotypes. The people they had been taught to distrust often treated them with kindness. Slowly, something began to shift inside their minds. They started learning about the culture, about faith, about Islam. What they discovered surprised many of them. The discipline of daily prayer, the strong sense of community, the deep emphasis on patience, charity, and peace. For some soldiers, it sparked curiosity. For others, it sparked a journey that would eventually change their lives forever. At first, the mission sounded simple. American troops were told they were there to fight dangerous enemies and protect global stability. But once boots hit the ground in the Middle East, many soldiers began to notice something strange. The reality didn't always match the story. villages destroyed by airstrikes, civilians caught in the middle of battles, communities living in constant fear of both militants and military operations. Some Marines began asking quiet questions late at night inside their bases. If we're here to help, why do so many people suffer? The more they patrolled towns and cities, the more complicated the situation appeared. They saw ordinary families trying to survive between armed groups, political interests, and international forces. For some soldiers, the war started to feel less like a clear mission and more like a massive geopolitical chess game. A game where the people on the ground, both civilians and soldiers, were simply pieces on the board. And that realization planted a dangerous seed: doubt. A doubt that would eventually push some veterans to speak out and challenge the very narrative they had once believed. For some American soldiers, the war didn't just change their view of politics, it changed their view of life. During long deployments, many troops spent time interacting with local communities, translators, and religious leaders. They observed something they had never fully understood before: faith. 5 times a day, Muslims stopped everything to pray. In the middle of chaos, in the middle of war, they still bowed in discipline and devotion. For some soldiers, it was deeply striking. Despite poverty, destruction, and constant danger, many families remained calm, patient, and united by belief. A few troops began asking questions: what gives these people this strength? Curiosity slowly turned into learning. Some soldiers started reading about Islam. Others spoke with local imams or Muslim friends they met during deployment. And for a small number of them, the experience became something far more personal: a spiritual journey. Over the years, there have been cases of Western soldiers who chose to embrace Islam after their time in the Middle East. Their decisions shocked many people back home. But for those veterans, the choice wasn't political, it was personal. A search for meaning after witnessing the harsh realities of war. And for them, the battlefield had unexpectedly become the beginning of a new path in life. When the war ended for many soldiers, the battle inside their minds had only just begun. Back home in the United States, some veterans struggled with memories they couldn't forget. Explosions, lost friends, and questions that refused to disappear. But a few former soldiers chose a different path. They began speaking publicly. One veteran after another started appearing in interviews, protests, and online videos, sharing their experiences from the battlefield. Some claimed the wars in the Middle East had become endless cycles of violence. Others said soldiers were often sent into dangerous missions without fully understanding the bigger political picture. These voices quickly spread across social media. For supporters, these veterans were brave truth-tellers. For critics, their statements were controversial and sometimes dangerous. But the message was spreading. More and more former troops were beginning to question the purpose of the wars they once fought. And as their stories reached millions of people around the world, a powerful question began echoing louder than ever. What was the real cost of war, and who was paying the price? Across the United States, a quiet storm was building among veterans. Many returned home carrying invisible wounds, nightmares, PTSD, memories that refused to fade. Some felt forgotten by the same system that once called them heroes. Hospitals were overcrowded, support systems were slow, and many former soldiers struggled to rebuild their lives. But beyond the personal pain, something else was growing: anger. Veterans began gathering in communities, online forums, and public demonstrations. They shared stories of confusion on the battlefield, of missions that seemed to change without explanation, of wars that never seemed to end. For some of them, the feeling was the same. They had sacrificed everything, but the answers they were looking for were still missing. Slowly, their voices began reaching the public. Videos of veterans speaking out spread across the internet. Millions watched as former soldiers questioned the wars they once fought in. And with every new testimony, the pressure on political leaders grew stronger. Because when the people who fought the war start asking questions, the entire world starts listening. What once sounded like isolated voices was now becoming a movement. Across America, more veterans began stepping forward, sharing their stories in interviews, podcasts, and public forums. Some described confusion on the battlefield. Others talked about decisions made far above their rank, decisions that shaped missions, alliances, and strategies they were ordered to follow. These testimonies didn't always tell the same story, but they had one thing in common: doubt. Doubt about endless wars. Doubt about political motives. Doubt about whether the sacrifices of soldiers truly led to lasting peace. At the same time, public debate in the United States started intensifying. Journalists, analysts, and citizens began questioning decades of military involvement across the Middle East. Was the strategy working? Had the wars achieved their goals? Or had they created new conflicts that would last for generations? For many veterans, the conversation was long overdue, because after years of silence, the system itself was beginning to face questions it could no longer ignore. For decades, wars were explained through speeches, headlines, and official statements, but the real stories often lived somewhere else, inside the memories of the soldiers who were actually there. Today, more veterans are stepping forward to share what they experienced, the confusion, the sacrifices, and the difficult questions that followed them home. Some speak about the cost of war. Others talk about the human connections they witnessed between cultures that were supposed to be enemies. Their voices are not always the same. Some defend the missions they served in. Others criticize the decisions behind them. But together they reveal a powerful truth. War is never as simple as it appears. And when the people who fought on the front lines begin telling their stories, the world begins to see the conflict from a different perspective. Because sometimes the most powerful voices in history are not politicians or generals. They are the soldiers who finally decide to speak.